بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. Alhamdulillah, this is lesson 5 in our study of the work Al-Hikm Al-Ata'iyya by Imam Ibn Ata'illah As-Sakandari rahimahullah ta'ala. And yesterday, covering Hikmah number 4, we were talking about a term called tadbir. Before that, with Hikmah number 2, we introduced the terms tajreed and asbab. And last night we introduced the term tadbir. And we said that the basic meaning of tadbir is management or planning. And we discussed how there is a negative tadbir and a positive tadbir, a blameworthy type and a praiseworthy type. Now, going to the words of Ibn Ata'illah, we mentioned a statement of his in another work, not the Hikam, that he wrote just on the topic of tadbir. He wrote a book called At-Tanwir fi Isqat al-Tadbir, the book of illumination in dropping tadbir, dropping this selfish calculation and management. So in that book he said that blameworthy tadbir is any tadbir that preoccupies you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and prevents you from worship. While the praiseworthy tadbir is any tadbir you do that's drawing you nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to review this a little bit to understand the 5th hikmah we covered tonight. So bad tadbir, what would that look like? It would look like a person who is being heedless of Allah Ta'ala in ghafla while they earn their livelihood. So they are heedless of Allah Ta'ala, they do not remember Allah, they do not connect the act of earning a living with the tawfiq of Allah and with the fact that the manner of earning a living is a sabab, a cause. And that cause is the direct creation of Allah Ta'ala. So they're heedless of that. For in their mind, it's all about them and their energy and their output. There's no thought about the creator of all of these gifts that enables them to do that work. Bad tadbir is also obsessing over money while neglecting to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the provider. It is the failure to understand the source of rizq. Where does our rizq come from? If you ask most people, they'll say it comes from their job. It comes from their bank account. It comes from wherever they're getting their check. But Allah Ta'ala answers that question for us. He says in the Quran, وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ وَمَا تُوعَدُونَ. In the sama, in the heavens, is your provision and what you are promised. And what it means is, this is something apportioned to us by divine will. Bad tadbir also means you don't have an intention when you're working in the world. Meaning you don't have an intention that turns that working into something praiseworthy and pleasing to Allah Ta'ala. It's just about getting the money. It's just about using that money for your desires without a good intention connected to it. That's bad tadbir. What about good tadbir? Good tadbir would be to work in the world with a good intention. So you work, you go to your 9 to 5 with the intention of fulfilling the obligation on you to care for your dependents, to care for those who are under your care, to go with that niyyah. It is to plan things that Allah Ta'ala asks you to plan. So not all tadbir is bad. The good tadbir is the planning of the things that Allah asks you to do already. So for example, Allah Ta'ala asks of us to pray our 5 daily prayers on time. So this means that if you know you have to get up and pray Fajr on time, and you're going to have a hard time doing it because you're getting home late and you're tired, there's some tadbir that needs to go on. That could mean different things for different people. For some people, that is to take a nice hot shower and have some chamomile tea, set 5 alarms, read a nice book for 5 minutes in dim light and just relax themselves so they can go into a deeper sleep with multiple alarms so that they can get up for Fajr. In all of that, there is tadbir, they're planning. Even if it's just as simple as setting the alarm and going to bed and not staying up too late, that's planning, but that's praiseworthy because you're planning like that in order to fulfill an obligation. Likewise, to work in the world with the dunya in your hand and not in your heart, that is praiseworthy tadbir, because you then use whatever you're earning of the halal to fulfill an objective mentioned in the Quran, وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا, to populate the world and to manage the world and to bring beauty into the world. And lastly, you use the means and you see that they are the act of God. That's praiseworthy tadbir. So you're working at your job, you're going to school, you're going to the doctor's office, you're interacting with the asbab, and as you're interacting with them to fulfill that aspect of sharia, the outward, the zahir, you also recognize inwardly that this is the act of God. When you drink water, water is a cause for quenching your thirst. Does the water quench your thirst independently? No, it does not. That is not our belief. Our belief as Muslims is that all causes bring effects that are created by God, and those effects are in conjunction with the causes, with the means. They're not by the means, they are in conjunction with them. Yani, عندها لا بها, as they say in Arabic. So let's look at one example of this, and I'm going to pick on some doctors today. All right, we have a couple of doctors here. So let's take Dr. A. And this Dr. A has bad, blameworthy tadbir. His only concern is to bill as many patients as possible. He wants them in and out just to get as many clients, as many patients so he can bill them and get as much money to do whatever he wants to amass this fortune. So he is not looking at any higher purpose to his practice of medicine beyond amassing dunya. That's his tadbir. It's a bad tadbir. But then you have Dr. B, who has good tadbir, and he practices medicine with the intention of fulfilling a communal obligation, a fard kifaya, for practicing medicine. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he said that there are two types of people required in every land, and if they're not there, you shouldn't live there. You need a doctor of religion and a doctor for the bodies. Meaning you need to have ulama and atibba. You need doctors and you need ulama, scholars. One helps you in matters of deen, the other helps you in the matter of health. So the doctor who has positive, praiseworthy tadbir is practicing medicine with the intention of fulfilling a communal obligation, of helping people, of alleviating pain from people. And yes, they have to earn a living for their family as well. But that's also a praiseworthy intention to fulfill that other obligation. So that is praiseworthy tadbir. So we are after good tadbir that is in the appropriate place, and we're avoiding bad tadbir. And this is what Imam Ibn Ata'illah is trying to teach us. If you read each hikmah by itself without the commentary and without this understanding, you may get the impression that in one hikmah he's telling you to avoid the world of means. And another hikmah, you get the impression that he's telling you, if you're in the world of means, don't seek anything higher. But he's not saying either this or that. He's talking about a good aspect and a bad aspect. So we have some basira, we have clarity and spiritual insight. So we move on to hikmah 5, and he talks about this basira, this spiritual insight, and how that spiritual insight can be muddied, how it can be tainted, how it can be blurred. So we know the word basar refers to the physical eye, the ocular vision of seeing with the eye, and basira refers to the spiritual eye. If you've ever been outside in the desert on a windy day, you know that the slightest speck will make it difficult to see. And likewise, there are things that cause specks to our spiritual heart that they don't blind us, but they blur that spiritual heart. So he talks about these things in Hikmah number 5. He says, اجتهادك فيما ضمن لك وتقصيرك فيما طلب منك دليل على انطماس البصيرة منك. Your striving for what has already been guaranteed to you, and your remissness, your neglect of what is demanded of you, are signs of the blurring of your intellect. So he's telling us that one of the signs, or two of the signs, that your spiritual insight is getting blurry is, number one, you are exerting strenuous effort for what's already guaranteed for you, while being negligent of what is demanded of you. So this brings up two questions. What exactly is guaranteed for us, and what is demanded of us? So the thing that is guaranteed for us is the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our rizq has already been decreed. We do work in the world of cause and effect to earn a livelihood, but it is the rizq of Allah that's been preordained. We don't know how much that will be or how much it will not be. We don't know all the avenues through which it might come into our life. We don't have access to that. We are ordered simply on the level of Sharia to seek it in a way that is halal, while trusting in Allah Ta'ala, who apportions the arzaq. That is what is guaranteed to us. Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن دَابَّةٍ لَا تَحْمِلُ رِزْقَهَا اللَّهُ يَرْزُقُهَا وَإِيَّاكُمْ. How many a creature does not carry its own provision, rather it is Allah who provides for it and provides for you. And you see a connection between what is guaranteed and what is asked of you. In the words of Allah Ta'ala, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. Command your family to establish the salat and be patient in that. Indeed, we provide for you and for them. So there's a connection between fulfilling what is sought from you while knowing that there's rizq guaranteed for you. So he says the first thing is you're striving, you have ijtihad in what is already guaranteed, while at the same time being negligent of what is demanded of you. What is demanded of us? It is ubudiyah, servitude to Allah, ta'atullah, imtithalu awamirillah, fulfilling the divine commands, expressing our essential servitude to Allah Ta'ala, obedience to Allah Ta'ala. And this is referenced in the Quran in so many verses. It is the kind of striving that we're asked to do. وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. There is naught for man except what they strive for. But that striving is the striving of ibadah, not necessarily the striving of what is already promised to us. So the provision has been guaranteed. The rizq is guaranteed. He ordered us to use the means at our disposal while seeking those means and trusting in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're combining again between Sharia and Haqiqah. Sharia says, seek the rizq, and the Haqiqah, the spiritual reality, says, understand that's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek it through the asbab while knowing that Allah creates the effects through those asbab or in conjunction with those asbab. Ibn Ata'illah is not telling us here that we should neglect the means, that we should become spiritual bums without doing anything. He's not saying that. He's saying that the means are an external cause, and Allah's provision is in conjunction with those external causes. Now, guaranteed rizq for you and me doesn't mean that we're going to receive that rizq outside of the world of means. Allah has promised to provide for His servants. Does that mean you can go sit on a mountaintop and meditate and your stomach will be full and you'll have your thirst quenched and you'll be sheltered from the elements without doing anything? That's not what it means. It means that Allah has guaranteed it for you through asbab that you may know or may not know, but you are ordered to pursue in a halal way while knowing that Allah is the creator of those things and they are not independent. This is what Allah Ta'ala asks of us. So we can look at this hikmah and say there is a praiseworthy striving and a blameworthy striving. Because he's saying that you're striving for what's already guaranteed, the rizq of Allah, while being negligent of what is asked of you, which is obedience to Allah, is a sign that your spiritual insight is blurred, your spiritual vision is blurred. Positive, praiseworthy ijtihad is using the means Allah has allowed you to use to seek provision while trusting in Him and not the means. Blameworthy ijtihad, in this case, is busying yourself with the means to the point that they distract you from the obligations that Allah has put upon you. Now, what are some everyday examples of how this might look? We can think of a number of examples of how a person could be going out of their way to strive for what is already guaranteed while neglecting what Allah asks of them. Case in point, a person who is working really hard at their job and they're so engrossed in work that they don't even pray their salat until they get home and put them all together. They're praying Fajr at home perhaps, but then they get home at maybe 7, 8 o'clock at night and they're praying Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha all together, letting the time of the salawat run out while they're at work without an excuse because they're busy. So they are striving in what's already guaranteed, but they're being negligent of what Allah has asked of them to strive for. This is an indication that their basira is blurry. Or it's the person who purposely misses Jumu'ah without an excuse. Not the person who is held back and the boss won't let them go. That's a different scenario. This is the person who has the ability to go for Jumu'ah, but they'd rather use that time for working. They're so concerned with the working that they neglect the obligations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or they're so occupied with work that even when they are praying on time, they're rushing through it to get right back to work. And another example would be a person who is so busy earning their money that they neglect to educate themselves about their deen and they neglect to educate their children about the deen. So they're so busy in the realm of what is already been guaranteed of them, but neglect what Allah has asked of them. This is a misplacing of priorities. That's essentially what it is. Misplacing the priorities. Ibn Ata'illah is not saying that one cannot earn a living. He's saying that you have to give things their due. This is hikmah. وَضُعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. Put everything in its proper place. So, priorities is the issue. When a person believes that the dunya is more important than the akhirah, they are going to be with a blurry spiritual vision because they're going to give priority to what's guaranteed while neglecting what Allah asks of them. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى. Allah says, rather you prefer the life of this world while the hereafter is better and longer lasting. Now, people have energy for dunya, but then they lack energy for matters of akhirah. It's a matter of priorities. And to end, we find in the Quran a description in Surah An-Nur where Allah describes the believers who have the perfect balance. In some verses in Surah An-Nur, Allah Ta'ala says, speaking about the masajid, في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه ويسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. In these verses, Allah Ta'ala says that in the houses, the masajid, which Allah has ordered to be raised, in which His name is mentioned, they exalt Him in these houses in the morning and the evening. Who are these people? Rijal, men. And this refers to people of diligence. Men whom neither tijara, business, commerce, nor sales distract them, tulhihim, distract them from the remembrance of Allah, the establishment of salat, and giving zakat. And they fear a day in which the hearts and the eyes will turn about So we see in this verse, or these verses, Allah Ta'ala is describing the believers who are not distracted by the world of asbab. La tulhihim. And there's a huge difference between saying that so-and-so is not distracted by dunya and saying so-and-so does not engage in dunya. This verse does not say the believers don't engage in dunya. It's saying that when they engage in the dunya, it doesn't distract them from the top priorities. Right? The asbab are a means to fulfill the obligations of Allah Ta'ala. The obligations Allah has put on us do not take the back seat to the priority of earning a living. This is what Ibn Ata'illah is telling us, to get our priorities right. And so he says, you striving for what's been guaranteed, your rizq, while being negligent of what has been demanded of you, the obligations, is a proof that your basira is blurred, your inner spiritual vision. So if you want to clean that up and remove the blurriness, what do you have to do? You have to have proper tadbir in dunya, but with the proper intention in order to facilitate your priority, which is ibadatullah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.